Artwork, critiques, Photoshop files, and reference sheets are all available on my Patreon. Well, hello there guys and girls, my name's Mikey, welcome back to my room. It's time for another tutorial. And today we're going to be popping back to basics. I'm going to be showing you guys just how to use one super cheap disposable mechanical pencil or another standard 2B pencil of your own to get professional looking results for your anime, manga, or really just any type of illustration. It's been a good old while since I've done a desktop facing tutorial. It's nice to be back. And since then we've had a lot of new subscribers to the channel. Thank you very much for joining us guys. And of course, if you haven't, make sure you're clicking that red subscribe button somewhere down there. And basically I thought we could just make sure that we all know how to use the basic equipment to get some really nice professional clean lines going on, avoiding any of that wobbly line syndrome. And that way, once we're able to get the most out of our tools together, we can crack on with some more tutorials in the future. Now, a lot of people do ask me, Mikey, what should I be doing to get into art? Should I start saving up for a drawing tablet, etc.? And I'd just say that really you do not need to wait for the best stuff whatsoever. As mentioned, this is a super cheap disposable mechanical pencil. I got it from a super cheap pack, not even from a stationery store, from a supermarket. These are Papermate and they come in bulk, although just grab anything you want. It's got a 2B feel to it. It says a HB lead, but I'd really say this is more of a 2B vibe. And then I'm also going to be working on just a load of cheap disposable printer paper. Now, because my desk is a relatively hard surface, you never want to lay just one sheet of paper down because it's not going to give you the best line feedback feeling at all. To get a better texture and a slightly softer surface, lay down a number of sheets of paper here. There we go. And that's actually going to create a much better result immediately to your artwork. So make sure you're doing that if you're not already. Then of course, I've got a super cheap rubber here, just in case we make any mistakes as I go along. Although I do appreciate they're probably called erasers for you guys in the States, but here in Queen's England, we call them rubbers. Although to be honest, in either meaning or interpretation, the exact same rules are going to apply. If you think you're going to be into a situation at some point where you're going to need to start handling your pencil, you probably want to make sure you've got a rubber on you as well in order to avoid mistakes, or the kind of long-term mistakes that are going to kick in about 9 months later. And then the last thing as well is when I'm working, I like to put down a scrap sheet of paper in order to rest my hand on so that I'm not resting my hand directly on the piece of paper that I'm going to be using to draw. And this is essentially so that the natural oils and greases, even from a clean hand, don't eventually foul up the page and affect your line weight and texture and so on. We want to have some really crisp, professional looking lines. And it's also going to stop your hand from picking up bits of graphite as you work and smudging the rest of your page. So get yourself basically set up like that. And now I'm just going to run you through the different ways you can actually get some nice effects and lines out of your pencil, the best way to use this overall, and I'm going to just go through the basic setup and details whilst we're over some time lapse of a piece of artwork which is giving us the example. I thought if we do it in this method, you're not going to end up with a video that's about half an hour long, and then we can just crack through to the essentials. So the first thing in mind for the way I tend to do things is that if I'm going to be lightly sketching out a piece to just work out the basic shapes and the building blocks, I would tend to have my hand actually relatively far up along this pencil, not near the tip at all. And I'm also keeping my grip relatively light. You don't want to be pinching this thing really hard. And I've got my hand in a fairly relaxed posture. And I just use that to start building up basic shapes. And if you've never really had a go at sort of drawing and so on before, do bear in mind that your hand-eye coordination, your ability to put the line exactly where you want to, might not be there just yet. So do not worry, practice, 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 and you will start to get used to things. So as you can see, I'm essentially just using a lot of very light strokes. I'm not just moving the pencil from my hand, but I'm also moving my whole arm as well. And I'm just going to do this to build up a basic, roughly circular shape. It might seem like the madman's quest, but if you just sit down and actually just start to lightly put some circles and squares and triangles together, those basic building block shapes, and getting that knowledge and experience and repetition in your hand, is going to serve you massively for doing stuff in the future. So you can see I haven't drawn one perfect circle. I'm just sweeping in loads of different lines to build up this shape, and it might be that I'm just going to use this as an example of where I'm going to be building up a face later. When I've got some straighter lines, like the center line of a face, I'm using some sweeping gestures here. And the whole time at this stage, I am not pressing the pencil hard whatsoever onto the page. I'm just sweeping out these shapes, maybe popping out for a bit of a cheek here before I sweep into a jawline here and sweep down towards the chin, and then maybe start to bring things back up. Whatever I'm doing here is not too important. You've probably got an actual nicer example of me using it to create some fairly crisp illustration that's going on. So by doing that, we're going to make sure that we're not marking or pressing on the page very hard, our piece of paper, and it means that we can come back at a later stage and actually start erasing some of these kind of building blocks lines to our finished artwork without actually damaging the paper underneath. So start off light if you're just trying to loosely work out where you're going to be placing the features of your character. Then you might find yourself at a point where you want to be putting some slightly crisper lines. And one of the first things to bear in mind is that with our disposable pencil, and if you're using a more traditional 2B pencil, it just means you're going to want to sharpen it a lot with your pencil sharpener. I can just break off the end of this thing and extend it a bit further, and I'm going to get a very strong hard edge. So I'm always thinking, as I'm using this, where is the thinnest, hardest edge, which is going to be giving me the cleanest and darkest line. So as I'm working along here, the lead itself is always going to go onto the page and flatten ever so slightly. But in order to keep the line very strong and dark, I'm constantly rotating the pencil in my hand. Get to that sharp edge, wear it down ever so slightly, and then once it's just getting a little bit too kind of wide or flat, just rotate that slightly in my hand just to get the newest, sharpest corner as I work my way around. And again, you can do that by building up a lot of smaller gestures to get an overall line that you like. And by doing it in this method, you're not slowly and painfully trying to get this one perfect edge. That's where you're going to get a lot of wobbly problems. You want to avoid that. But if you do a lot of faster, quicker gestures, and if your hand's sitting in a very good curve, you can move it from the hand, or maybe you just want to sweep down for something larger just by getting more involved with your arm. But if you really want to just pin it down, build it up with lots of movements just like this. This is how you're going to start to get those clean lines that you can, of course, just sharpen up a little bit from side to side from time to time. And also, when I'm doing this, I am now pressing a bit more firmly into the page. I'm not digging in 100%, but I'm definitely marking the paper now with some intent because I want these lines to stay. These are going to be the building blocks that I'm going to start using for colouring in the different textures and feelings of any character. And then we have the opportunity to put in some flat colours or maybe some greys for shading. Now, I notice that a lot of people, when they start illustrating, especially in an anime style, is they might do a lot of very soft gradients where they want to kind of show working from a darker area and then moving lighter and lighter over to a softer area. And that can be very, very effective if you know what you're doing and you're quite happy. But I see people do that a lot all over their illustration to the point where everything becomes very muddy and very unclear. And if what you've got in mind, and we are just talking about this in particular at the moment, is a sharper, cleaner anime and manga feel about things, you might want to take a look at a lot of anime and manga in the comic books and that style of cell animation, and just keep an eye on how they often actually use some very clean, hard edges instead. So there might be an area around a face where you're going to very lightly, again, as if I'm doing a soft line with my hand fairly far up the pencil, just think of an area that's going to be in shadow just off to the side. We're going to assume that this is vaguely ahead. And the way that I'm going to actually start to fill this in is, firstly, I'm just going to, maybe on a separate scrap of paper over here or somewhere else, I'm just going to run the pencil up and down against the page until I feel it become much smoother. And that's because I'm actually wearing a longer flat edge into the lead. Again, my hand is so far away, but it means I'm able to cover a lot of distance right over here by doing very little work over here to really get some sweeping zones. Because you don't want to start filling in tiny spot by tiny spot. You're going to get a really patchy finish. You want to be able to sweep in very gently and very slowly. Slow and steady wins the race when you're using a pencil to put down a bit of basic tone. So you can see that I am not pressing very hard whatsoever. I could certainly increase the pressure if I want to, depending on what kind of finish I would like. And let's just continue and start filling in over here. My hand is really so far away up this pencil end, and because the pencil is at such a shallow angle to the page, it means I'm getting a large amount of surface area from that lead that's kind of covering a lot of area as I sweep through. I'm going up and down in this motion like so, and I can start to use this to fill a lot of very general areas. If you're going to do one block next to another, you do want to be careful not to overlap, but go right up to the edge of your last section. Otherwise, again, you're going to get these extra phantom lines of different texture coming in. But if you want to make this even darker, you can, as I was saying, press more firmly, like so. But you can sometimes end up getting some uneven textures. What you can also do is go over another area again, but do it at a different angle. Don't go over up and down exactly the same way. If you're looking to put a second layer on, just do it at 45 degrees instead, just so that your strokes are actually going to start to blend in the separate strokes of the layer below. And again, it's going to much more evenly fill a section of that page as well. So you've got that very light opportunity to go in. And you can see again that this pencil lead is sticking out quite far on this pencil, and I'm allowing it to get very, very flat along one edge. This is an example where I don't want to be turning the pencil around, because I'm going to suddenly go from this nice soft flat edge, and then I'm going to lose it, and all of a sudden I'm back to that sharp point. And once again, you'll have to just wear that down on a scrap piece of paper to reach a point where you're happy to just softly fill in those blends. Now, if you want to work hyper lightly, you can actually hold the pencil completely differently with an overhand grip like this, and you can use that to very, very lightly work on various gestures and various forms. This is great if you're trying to have a very loose and free feeling with your artwork, especially at an early stage if you're trying to kind of understand what's going on with form and design. But personally, it's not something I use too often if I'm trying to get a very crisp, very clean, settled anime finish as well. So I tend to kind of keep my very far back grips in the more traditional hand up situation, or hand to the side as opposed to hand facing down, just to get some really nice soft blends for different textures. And again, you don't want to have your hand up towards the end to do that. You want to be using yourself right away from the tip and smoothly working back and forth on an area. Keep it very light, keep it very slow, keep it very smooth, and that's how you're going to get the best finish for that. Then, however, we've got the exact polar opposite. Maybe you start wanting to get some really high contrast, some great finish, and some very dark lines. So if I just put a box in here, this is why I say you can do an awful lot with just one mechanical pencil. There are a range of De La Rowney, I think I've said that completely wrongly, but other sort of pencil sets that you can get that go all the way from HB up to 12B, and they're going to make it a very easy time for you to get some very, very dark tones in. However, you can just do it with this one pencil if you're a bit short for space, or you have a pencil in your pocket but want to get a range of different artwork out of the way. And when I start to want to use this exact same thing to get some very solid black dark areas, my hand is suddenly going to come up towards the tip of this pencil. I'm going to be holding it a little bit more firmly, and instead of the pressure going on the side of the nib as I put it against the paper, instead I'm going to have the pressure go from my hand straight out the end of that tip. And I'm going to work in relatively small areas, and I'm going to work very firmly into the page, and I'm not going to cover a lot of distance quickly. I'm not trying to do this, because this isn't quite as black as I'd want. It looks quite black, but you might see that's still a bit closer to grey. I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm really going to be going over the same area slowly, and I'm also going to be considering rotating again so that I keep getting a sharp edge as I dig into the page. This means that I've got less surface area, more pressure, more of that graphite per different individual inch or area of paper is going to go onto the page and make it as dark as possible. So here I am, just slowly filling in that square. I've got a few different bits of leads just curling off because of the amount of pressure that I'm using. There we go. And that's going to give me a very dark finish, which is going to give me a lot of contrast. This is going to be very good for when you want those moments of absolute black to give yourself an anime feel for hair and other areas. So hopefully, as you can see, that's exactly what I've been doing against the anime picture that we've got on screen at the moment. Just those different ways of holding your pencil. Very light, very gently for your basic lines. Keep your movements sweeping. Build up your lines with a number of strokes, I should say. Don't push your way to your final finish line immediately. It's never going to happen. Let it build up with a form, and then you're going to get much smoother action. Let your hand go all the way to the end of a pencil if you want to have a really light effect. Let's just wear down that nib, just like so, to get soft strokes with either hand position that works for you, or go right to the end and start pressing down for these final firmer lines as well. And that really is it. If you can just make sure you've got that under your thumb and you're relatively comfortable or practiced with trying to draw some basic shapes and building up these different forms, those are going to really look after you for getting a lot of different work done with your anime and manga in the future. And so, thanks a lot for watching, guys. I really do hope you found this quick basic tutorial on getting the best effect and cleanest lines that you can whilst using some very cheap and basic equipment to have been of some use. That way we can kind of all have this in the back of our minds when I go ahead and do some more drawing tutorials further down the line. And so, guys, you've probably been noticing a lot of names scrolling on screen at the moment, somewhere on top of our generic schoolgirl character that we've put together for today's tutorial, and those delicious people are my patrons on Patreon. So basically, if you'd like to grab a copy of today's illustration for your own reference, or if you'd actually like to get the worksheets to any of my other pencil and paper tutorials that I've done in the past, I keep copies of all of the tutorial characters and all of the worksheets available on there, and you can grab the entire pack for $1. So if you're interested, then my Patreon links are probably going to be on screen at the end or in the description below, and you can just grab the entire set if you fancy it. And if not, just clicking that subscribe button down here somewhere is enough to make me a happy chappy. So a great big thank you to Stephen F, Anthony C, Ryder2KX, Michael P, Carlos R, Fabio, Akumu Arts, Jamie, Marissa, Zahaki, and Brendan J. Those guys are some of the higher tier patrons. You do get all sorts of different rewards on there, but don't worry, this isn't some kind of hard sell. That's just how I'm able to make free drawing tutorials for you guys here on YouTube. However, get in the comments section below, let me know what else you'd like to be learning in the future. And you know what, guys? I'll see you next time. Take care.